We will say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. There was some confusion this week as a member of the royal family appeared to be pictured with Donald Trump. Thankfully, it wasn't an unannounced state visit, no. The Duchess of Cornwall said she couldn't resist being photographed with this group of jokers during a charity event in the city. Coming up, our very own Duchess of Walthamstow thinks even a gay prince wouldn't help address homophobia and discrimination in the UK. Greg argues the only way to tackle social mobility is to raise taxes. Nick says Merkel got it wrong on immigration. And Michelle tries to convince us that Bitcoin is the future. But first, it's me. Theresa May went to Brussels to seal the deal. The EU were ready and willing. And then who threw a spanner in the works? The DUP. The party that's propping up her government and the one client group that was meant to be on her side. The Prime Minister certainly doesn't have the luck of the Irish. Mrs May is bouncing around like a silver ball in a Brexit pinball machine, caught between the EU, her DUP backers, Tory hard Brexiteers, and those who want a softer exit. And that's before we even get on to discussing a future trade deal, if we ever do. This all comes down to the fact that the UK holds none of the cards in these negotiations. But only one thing is clear. We have a very poor hand and hardly any time to play it. What's it to be, panel? Twist, stick or fold?
Look, given the week there's been, only the most swivel-headed Brexiteer. And where is Carol when you want her? No, that's a joke, Carol. That's a joke. That's a joke. It has been shambolic from start to finish. In fact, you can even make the argument that it has got worse as the week has gone on. But, I'm intrigued by your choice of words. You say the EU was ready and willing on Monday. Really?
Sure, they had the three-course lunch all set out.
Really? Do you not think that every possible opportunity that the European side can come, they say...
You're throwing this back, aren't you? Instead of it being our lack of preparedness, the fact that we're fighting to get with each other on what we want the eventual Brexit deal to look like, which the Cabinet hasn't even discussed. You're blaming Juncker and Tusk?
How can you possibly say lack of preparedness? There are 58 impact statements that were commissioned but weren't commissioned, that were read but weren't. That's the level of preparedness. No, it has been shambles. But don't characterise it all to the UK side. I think the EU have been incredibly obstructive. And let's just pause and think. Quite a piece of important research came in today. An Institute of Directors report that says there is tremendous confidence about British business in 20... Now, some of that is the viewers hurting. I appreciate. That's because the pound is low. It makes it cheaper against the euro, cheaper against the dollar. So it's all very well if I'm making bottles and selling them across the whole of Europe, I'm doing very, very well. If our viewers are trying to go on a winter holiday, it's damn tough for them. But it's not all... It's been a bad week, but it's not as bleak as you Ramonas would paint it, truly.
Please don't call me a Ramona. Let's try and keep this nice, Nick.
OK, all right, we're going to call you Rachel.
I won't call you a civil-eyed Brexiteer, because I know you're not one, and actually you're coming round to our side of the argument.
No, because without quoting the line, we have to Brexit. It's a fact.
I agree.
We have to Brexit.
Greg, can I just ask you, do you think she has no cards at all? Where do you see this going now?
I feel quite sorry for her, because I think she's doing something that's not going to be done. It's impossible. Yeah, I do, actually. I think...
ridiculous.
Hold on, let Greg explain. That was when she told the nation that we were going to have a hard Brexit.
Let me just take a clip from Arlene Foster, and I should warn you, there is flash photography in this clip.
Northern Ireland must leave the European Union on the same terms as the rest of the United Kingdom, and we will not accept any form of regulatory divergence which separates Northern Ireland economically or politically from the rest of the UK.
Now, that's why she shouldn't be in bed with them at all. Precisely. Because, the idea that you're in bed with this sort of fairly right-wing arch-Protestant organisation in Northern Ireland, who we'd have all dismissed, that they're holding the government to ransom, I think is terrible. But what it shows is she's saying, we want exactly the same deal as the rest of the UK. On things like agriculture, to achieve that, which might be what the deal that's done, to achieve that means you're never going to get a deal with the Americans on trade.
Just one quick one.
Because they want a different basis of agriculture.
One line from me, because I mustn't hog this, but you don't think she's been the architect of her misfortune, Theresa May, I'm talking about now?
Well, I think she
The
should.
Lancaster House speech, the DUP deal...
I'm quite surprised she didn't get... I'm quite surprised she didn't get Arlene Foster on side before and not leave it till she got out there.
I want to pick up on something Nick said about the Lancaster House speech, because it was in that speech that basically she explained that what we were going to have was we were going to come out of the customs union and the single market, which left us with a problem with Northern Ireland, didn't it? Because if we had a softer Brexit where we remained within those two things, then we could have regulatory consistency with Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland and the EU.
Exactly.
So she's made it been a hostage for fortune, hasn't it?
Completely. And also, what's just so completely annoying about the whole situation is the deal, the text was agreed. And when you see what Leo Varadkar had to say, actually, Northern Ireland is not the same as the rest of Britain. So they shouldn't have exactly the same deal as the rest of Britain because they have a border. So we have to do something about that. And to me, for Theresa May to have actually gone to the EU with a deal that would make sense and then for it to be scuppered by the DUP, who we've paid £1 billion to, no.
Michelle.
Insane.
I have come round to your view that we have to execute the will of the people, but we're seeing so many problems
That's
when
a big deal. I mean,
the will of the people.
Just gloss over that. That's quite a big statement you
but
just
what
made
do we
there.
do when the will of the people? There are so many different peoples to please.
But the will of the people in Northern Ireland was to remain.
Indeed.
Exactly. So what do we do when there are different wills of the people?
Well, first of all, I don't want to gloss over what you just said. I found that like a historical monumental moment there. That's quite staggering. I almost need to lay down. But
I'm a celebrity. She wants to get out of there. That's what she's just said. Get out of Brexit.
I'm just very disappointed by the whole handling of this thing because I do believe in Brexit and I still believe that we could make this work, but I do not understand what the government and the people that are supposed to be responsible for doing this and making it all go smooth as can be. I don't understand what they're doing. We just seem to open ourselves up to attack after attack after attack on things that could be so easily resolved. They don't seem to be... Well, they don't
What's
seem to be,
easy about this?
They don't seem to be communicating amongst themselves, point one. They seem to be telling lies, point two. Now, these things...
What, you mean David Davis on the impact statements?
Yeah,
what do you keep going on about these?
But what I'm saying is these are own goals that the government are making that they could be very easily avoided.
But you think that Northern Ireland is different to the rest of the country because of the border?
Yes, I do.
So it makes sense in terms of the deal that we would have had.
But it was always clear from the beginning, from the moment people voted for Brexit, that there was going to be a massive issue between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. Always. It was so obvious.
But it
what I don't even understand is, even on the deal they had, how are they going to stop European migrants coming into Southern Ireland and then just coming over the border and then coming into the UK? It meant setting up an immigration system around the rest of the UK. And it's always seemed to me that is one of the big issues. But to have let it get to the stage where you're going to announce the victory and then they tell you...
Could I say a quote from Ed Miliband, who I love totally spot on. So he said, what an absolutely ludicrous, incompetent, absurd, make it up as you go along, couldn't run a pee up in a brewery, bunch of jokers there are running the government at the most critical time in a generation for the country. Spot on, Ed.
Yeah, well, he did such a great job running the Labour Party, didn't he? So it's rather in greenhouses.
Well, I think he'd have done a better job on this issue.
Yeah, but so let's just throw it back to you a little bit. What do we do then? Just throw our hands up in horror and say, woe is us? What do we do?
Well, how long has she got now to sort it out? I mean, she's got the next meeting is, I think, on the 14th or something like that.
What do we do now? You quite rightly and accurately have chronicled the problems, and you're right, but what do we do?
I actually think that she has to row back on Lancaster House, because I don't think that you can solve the problem of Northern Ireland and regulatory alignment or convergence without us remaining within.
But you can see from all this why she went for an election. Because she needed a much bigger majority to get a lot of this sort of stuff through. Instead, she got a smaller majority, hands over the power to the DUP. And the right of the Tory party are at war with the rest almost.
And we haven't even looked at the problem of the fact that, you know, now this opens up the question again
of
Scotland and London.
Yes,
exactly.
Precisely.
Do you want to say something about that?
And I agree. I totally see where Sadiq Khan is coming from, and I see where Nicola Sturgeon is coming from.
I mean, Northern Ireland voted Remain, Wales voted out, Scotland voted Remain, Gibraltar voted Remain. Do we have a piecemeal exit from?
But no one ever
the
suggested
European
this was
Union?
going to be simple,
Yeah.
right?
No,
So
but
this
you're
was-
saying, but you're the one who always says it should be simple
Actually,
and
I
easy.
think they did.
I've never said.
The problem
Yes,
is
they
the
did. Liam
Brexiteers
Fox
did
did.
say it was simple.
Yes,
it was
they
written on
did.
the side of a
But
bus.
let me just come back on this.
350
I've
million
never
a week,
sat here and
simple.
said Brexit is simple and easy. That would make me a bit stupid to
Liam
think
Fox.
that.
Liam Fox said it's going to be the easiest deal
But I'm
in
not
history.
Liam Fox. You've just said
But
that
you
that's
said
what
they
I've
didn't
said.
say it was going to be easy, and they did, and they promised us a rose
What
garden.
I'm saying is, no, I don't believe that this is going to be simple and easy. This is very complex, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing something just because it's complex. But it does mean that what we should be doing is managing this as a proper, effective process. I do not understand why, I think it was yesterday, they were saying they haven't even had a proper cabinet conversation about what the end state potentially looks like. To me, I do not understand why Theresa May is not just getting everyone around the table
they're
going,
all
right,
ferrets in
listen.
a sack.
They're all divided. I think that's the
Ferrets in
problem.
a sack. And
Everyone around the
also,
table, and
she
sorts
set
it out
everyone
as the
up to
leader.
fight by having DEXEU, which was the department within Downing Street, to organise exit, as well as the Foreign Office, as well as the Department of
But then
Trade.
regroup. If I was Theresa May, I'd be regrouping my team.
I'll ask you a final question. Do you not think that your brother should have resigned over this? I mean, your brother said.
Which brother?
Your
I'm avoiding that
All
question.
the foreign secretary. I know you've got a lot of big family.
Resigned over what,
Well,
Greg?
because he told us all that they could go whistle for the money.
He still stands by that
Right.
350 million,
No, but-
and it is a gross figure.
Sure, but they say, they said they could go whistle for the money, and then he's part of a cabinet who agreed to give him £50 billion.
We haven't done the deal yet,
No, but
actually.
in the referendum, no one mentioned £50 billion to the EU to get out.
Well, we mentioned on the Remain side that it was going to be expensive. We mentioned that divorce bill wouldn't be cheap.
The reason why
Anyway.
divorce is expensive?
So
Stu?
damn good.
Because it's worth it.
You are coming to our team.
No.
OK, so it's my turn now. Christians should pray for Prince George to grow up gay. So claims Reverend Kelvin Holdsworth, who caused controversy by saying a gay monarch is the best way to fight homophobia in the church. Now, as much as I love the idea, I think Reverend Holdsworth is naive in his thinking. Just as having an African-American president didn't solve racism in the US, having a mixed-race duchess won't end racism in Britain, and neither will a gay king mean more acceptance of gay relationships. These first often cause an opposite reaction, where those on the other side of the argument think change has come too quickly or perhaps shouldn't have happened at all. Minority groups who don't have the same power, privilege or protection as the new figurehead can become targets. Let's be honest, if our Prince George does grow up to prefer princes over princesses, then he'll be by no means the first. In the end, what changes limiting beliefs is education and connection. This has to happen in our schools, places of employment, places of worship, and our media. So where homophobia is concerned, we need to change hearts and minds, and not just our figurehead.
I mean, I don't really like the debate at all about whether Prince George is gay or not gay. I think he's a four-year-old kid.
I
think he should be kept out of it
kept out of
altogether.
it.
And
I
I think it's a
agree.
very unfortunate.
I agree with
I
you.
also think the Reverend Kelvin Holdsworth is wrong. I think the change in my lifetime has towards homosexuality is massive. It's unbelievable how much it's changed.
Yeah.
It was interesting, and it will continue to change as one generation dies off and another generation
And by the time Prince George is old enough to think about relationships...
I mean, it was interesting. I was in Ireland for the weekend that they had the referendum on gay marriage.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about that is kids, particularly, kids, 20s, flew home from everywhere to vote. And what they were saying is, this is not the Catholic society that you think it is and used to be. Yeah. And 60-odd% voted in favour of gay marriage. And it was not, I don't think it was just about gay marriage, it was about an attitude of the church. Now, the Reverend Holdsworth is going to have the same thing in the Church of England in the end.
I agree.
That enough people will come through, enough of a generation will come through and say, we're not putting up with this anymore. Stop it.
And I don't think a figurehead is what changes things. I think it happens at a much more grassroots level. It's in terms of how you change society's thinking. And just one person doesn't do that.
Well, I was talking the other day with my daughter and saying, she had kids. Well, she said, I don't care if they're gay or not.
No,
Of course not. Half her friends are gay, and she doesn't care in the slightest bit. Now, that was not where we all were 30, 40 years ago.
And
it's just
Ireland,
a fundamental change.
Ireland has an openly gay head.
Yes.
Their leader, Leo Varadkar, is openly gay.
Well,
so
let's be honest, as long as our children don't marry socialists, I mean, we should be... No, it's a joke, by the way, before we start getting letters to wherever they go to.
We'll be on the phone.
Yeah, we go. A couple of things I want to run, but listen, I work in the media and I live in London, so I'm in a fairly sort of relaxed...
Exactly.
You're a metrosexual.
Possibly I am, whatever that might mean. I've never been in a mini metro. No, it's all lies. You talk about... do you have the sense, then, that there isn't acceptance?
No.
And also, another point, the media needs to do more. Don't you think the media is an incredibly welcoming and embracing...
Well, precisely. So if you look at...
Well, you said it needs to do more.
No, but I'm saying what happens... I said how the change happens is through people actually connecting with one another in terms of how we educate people and our media. So I'm not saying the media needs to do more. I'm saying that's how the change happens.
But you think there is a lack of
what
tolerance?
Reverend Kelvin Holdsworth is talking about is within the church. And, of course, this debate is definitely a debate that's being had at the moment in the church.
See.
And what I'm saying is I don't think it's a figurehead that changes that. I think it's actually people to people. It's that otherwise there'd be no racism in America.
Can we talk a bit more about what he actually was trying to achieve by his, I thought, rather tasteless remarks? Because in America, you still have church groups that, you know, if somebody's gay within their community, say, let's pray the gay away. And as Greg pointed out, in my lifetime, homosexuality has gone from being illegal to being... I think
acceptable.
Very perfectly acceptable.
Let's be honest about
it. Not almost compulsory. But June, so what he wanted the Church of England. I think you need to explain a bit.
Church of England,
the Church of England does not allow gay marriage in church. Other religions do allow gay marriage in church, and obviously the head of the Church of England is the monarch. Therefore,
precisely.
what he's saying is, we want to have a gay monarch in order to drive this revolution within the church.
But I'm saying he's missing a piece because actually I don't think that's what changes things.
Are you telling me if I'm a vicar and I'm really quite right-wing in the church, I'm going to be forced eventually to marry gay couples against my will? My belief in Christianity...
That's not what...
No, but I'm asking you.
That was his ultimate aim.
So I'm in the church and I'm ferociously right-wing, and I hate the sin and I love the sinners. So I love homosexuals, but I can't bear what I deem to be a sin, right? And I'm a vicar. Yeah. 2 gay men, 2 lesbian women. Am I going to be forced to marry them then, in your world?
But that I don't think that's the thing.
No, but I'm asking you.
Find someone else.
But my point is,
I believe it as a sin.
I think you can change hearts and minds differently.
I'm a vicar, right?
Yes.
I'm play make-believe, I know.
Yeah.
I'm a vicar and I see homosexuality as a sin. Are you going to make me marry a gay couple?
What I would say is that if we're having conversations within your congregation are probably going to change their mind on this issue.
But what about me? Have I got to marry this couple of gay men or women?
Would it be like doctors and abortions?
No,
they don't have to.
I wouldn't have to.
No,
surely
I think this is
Church of
something that
England
has to
already
be
does
decided
that.
on within the church.
The Church already does that with the ordination of women. I mean, you know, some bishops don't have to.
And some people
don't have to ordain women.
Michelle, what do you think? Sorry.
Like, did you say... Maybe I missed it. Did you say in your intro you would love it?
I would love a gay monarch.
Why? To me, it makes no difference. I couldn't care less if you're gay, straight, somewhere in the middle.
As someone who has many gay male friends, I'll be honest, I enjoy my time with them more than I do my straight male friends. So sorry.
Well, I know what I'm doing this Christmas.
But why is it relevant, someone's sexuality? I could not care who you guys around the table, no offence, but whether who you choose to sleep with, how often, in which way. I don't care. You do what you want. It's irrelevant to me. I wouldn't judge you.
But I'm not saying that I would judge the person. I'm saying I think great. I think it would be a fantastic thing, but I don't think that it would create the change that Reverend Kelvin Holdsworth thinks it would.
But the change is already coming by change. So there's a younger mindset. There's a younger mindset coming through.
Precisely, everything that I'm saying.
It's happening.
That's exactly the point. You don't need dramatic things like this.
No.
It'll happen anyway.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Well, I mean, I was just remembering that Justin Welby went a bit Tim Farron when asked about gay sex, and he clearly has his personal views.
Yes.
And the,
well, he
the
has
Church
to be very
of
careful because I've interviewed him about this.
Well, what does he say? Because
Well,
he says he's...
You've got to realise, he said, I'm the head of a faith where in some African countries, if I come out and be seen to be in supporting a way of homicide, I am putting my congregation at risk of being beaten to death or being discriminated against. So he said, I have to be very not so much, he said, everybody thinks of the Church of England. Well, it's not just, I've got people all around the world.
Yeah,
and that's why... No, he's a very considered man. He's a good bloke. He is a good bloke. Well, he is a good bloke, sorry.
Coming out in support of it,
because he has to be very careful how in certain...
But surely that's if members of those congregations in those African countries come out.
But sometimes they're minorities. No, but sometimes they're minorities. They're very small. When you've seen how Coptic Christians have been treated, he has to be very careful in which direction he takes the church. Otherwise, he's leaving his flocks in other countries, not this country, in a dangerous place.
Yeah. Is it OK for somebody to have a view that actually they're not comfortable with it? If that's their personal view, they're not going around beating people up, but they're just not personally comfortable with it. Is that OK?
Yes.
But that's their personal view.
Well, unless you're a baker in Northern Ireland, and then you get but then you get into all sorts of trouble because you won't bake a cake. Which was extraordinary.
But the Archbishop of Canterbury, it's a difficult role, isn't it? Because you're trying to hold together a church that actually doesn't different parts of it don't believe the same thing.
BBC, really, Greg.
No, I think it's a lot harder than that. I think it's a lot harder than that.
Can I actually just pick up the quote, Reverend Kelvin Holdsworth's actual quote? So this is what he said, and he's since apologised for it, actually. So he said, if people don't want to engage in campaigning in this way, they do in England have another unique option, which is to pray in the privacy of their hearts, or in public if they dare, for the Lord to bless Prince George with a love when he grows up of a fine young gentleman, which is what he said.
But I just think that's someone trying to be overly PC. That's what when I hear that statement, I just think that's someone trying to say something that doesn't need saying in order to feel like they're doing something that's PC.
Well, my point is I don't think it's actually going to get the results that he thinks it will.
OK, time to move on, my turn. Britain is in a mess. In some areas, it'll be 20 years before wages are back to the levels they were before the crash. And there are 65 cold spots where people's life chances are severely diminished. And now every single member of the group that's meant to advise the government on how to improve social mobility has resigned. They blame globalisation, deindustrialisation and austerity for the situation we're in now, and say the government is too focused on Brexit to address the problems we face. I do believe Mrs May recognises how serious this problem is. Even the resigning chairman, Alan Milburn, accepts this, but that means nothing unless her government is prepared to do something about it. Clearly, to improve the life chances of those living in those 65 cold spots will mean significant new investment over many years. And given where the country is financially, the only way of paying for those initiatives is, I'm afraid, increasing taxation.
Gregors, I've said this so many times and I will say it again. I really just think you should create a voluntary increased tax code for yourself, good people like you, and pay more tax, because no matter what the problem is, you think the answer is more tax. So just voluntarily pay more tax.
I've got a list, just briefly. The problems of the NHS, you said raise tax. The problems of elderly care, you said raise tax. Problems of poverty, raise tax. England not being able to win at penalties, you said raise tax. Back to you, Michelle. Those are four.
I think there are other things about the penalties that you should
all right, OK, well, I just wanted to check.
But
contact your accountant and ask him for ways of paying more tax. I'm sure he'll help you.
We have now lived through a period of austerity for close on 10 years, where local authority budgets have been decimated, where a lot of local authorities, the only money they've got left is for social care, and that has an impact. Now, it's no point...
And also stagnation of wages.
There's no point the Prime Minister stand up saying, I believe all this, if they're not prepared to do something. And do something means spending money.
I don't agree with you that you think that the answer to everything is just more cash and more tax. So what I would say is I completely share your perspective in terms of social mobility being a very important issue, and we should be doing what we can to help people, you know, to progress through the ranks if that's what they choose and to better their life circumstances. I think I'm a great example of such, and what I would say is I do think I've developed my life. I've come from an area that many would describe as deprived, less so now perhaps, but when I was growing up, I wasn't aware of opportunities that were available to me. So, for example, I say now, today, I would have been a trader in the city. If I'd have known then, at school, what I know now, I didn't even know the financial institutions of London existed. I didn't know the opportunities as traders and all the rest of it. So, for me, it was a lack of awareness as to what I could become. Now, obviously, things are changing. So, for example, I think education, teaching people that there's so many opportunities that they could do and actually that they can achieve them. So I'm involved, for example, with something University Technical Colleges, where we're working with employers to create different ways of learning for children 14 to 19, show them more of the opportunities that exist for them. I think that's great. That's not more tax necessarily going into that. And I think it's creating in kids better self-belief, because I was always told when I was a youngster, you'll amount to nothing, you'll do nothing, you're going to be like this, you're going to be like that. And I changed that through hard graft and opportunity and aspiration.
But that needs investment. That needs investment.
But no one
we need to invest in those young people.
It's awareness.
It's not just awareness.
Awareness requires investment.
It requires... No, it didn't. That came from within.
Oh, but she's a one-off. I can be a one-off.
But I don't
we
think
can all be
that's
one-off.
But clearly it didn't, because she didn't end up as a trader, which is what she thinks that she probably would have done best.
No, but I wasn't aware of the opportunities that were there for me. So, for example, I used to set myself goals.
So how would we make you aware, then? What kinds of programmes would we do to make you aware of the opportunities and then also provide you with those opportunities?
So lots of it
is
happening. So, for example, I've just mentioned University Technical Colleges. I think that they are a great practical example of how you can raise aspirations and awareness. It's about inspiring children. I hear so many young girls now going, "Oh, I'm going to..."
Everything you're talking about costs money, Michelle.
Where I agree with you, right? Where I agree with you is just throwing money at it without a plan is a waste of time.
Yeah, agreed.
And governments and local government have always been doing that. There's no point throwing money without the plan.
Great. Can we have a look at what Theresa May said when she actually took office on this particular issue?
If you're from an ordinary working-class family, life is much harder than many people in Westminster realise. You have a job, but you don't always have job security. If you're one of those families, if you're just managing, I want to address you directly. I know you're working around the clock. I know you're doing your best, and I know that sometimes life can be a struggle. The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by yours.
Well, I just have to say, Alan...
She looks 20 years younger, doesn't she?
Doesn't she?
She looks 20 years younger. Yeah. Sorry, June, that just struck me. God.
Well, Alan Milburn is a very close friend of mine, and I have to say the way that he and his team have been treated at the Social Mobility Commission is a disgrace.
They were coming to the end of their term anyway.
But the fact that...
So this flouncing around the studios last Sunday...
because they were not getting the support that they... there was a lot of lip service, but not the investment. Greg is talking about.
I think that it was good to see that clip of Theresa May, because this is something she really believes in. Now, the problem is the government is caught in a catch-22 situation, which is that they are consumed by Brexit. And Alan Milburn, your mate, said as he left, the government doesn't have the bandwidth to deliver on the promises she made on the steps of Downing Street, because Brexit is occupying all available headspace.
But that's precisely the point, Rachel. The causes of Brexit are not being dealt with, and that means that if we don't tackle this stuff now, then Britain's in a lot of trouble post-Brexit, because in order for us to thrive, we need to make social mobility.
The people who voted for Brexit are going to be the ones most put out.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying not to use it personally.
Of the 65 areas that they say it needs cold spots, where they need help, where they need... 60 of them voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
They had a majority voted for Brexit. And basically, it was a protest vote. It was a vote saying, look, we are... Now, what is interesting about those is that those 65 is actually they're in strange places. They're, you know, a lot of them on the coast, a lot of them in the rural area.
West Somerset.
West Somerset is the top one.
And
London much better. The city's much better.
I do think those poverty figures need a bit of a health warning, though, because for some people... Well, in some instances, it's classed poverty if you can't afford a mobile phone. Now, to me, yeah, absolutely, because I did that story.
Those are income statistics.
And
all the
time you take 60% of median income and you class that as poverty, you're never going to get rid of poverty. It's almost like the poverty. Now, are there issues to be addressed?
Are always going to be with us.
Yes, of course there are issues. But this idea, I think those Joseph Rowntree Foundation figures, and I'm sure they work very hard on them, there is another way to interpretation, because people like my parents' generation, not that they were, but that was poverty. There were kids without shoes on their feet and nobody had an indoor loo. That's poverty.
In Milburn's last report, I thought they said something that I thought was quite profound. They said, whole tracts of our country
Yes.
feel left behind because they are.
Exactly.
Whole communities feel that the benefits of globalisation have passed them by because they have. Whole sections of society feel they are not getting a fair chance to succeed because they're not. Now, it's not easy, this, is it? It's not an easy issue.
But
it's
it
not
must
it's
be
not
a
only
priority.
It's not
it
only
should be as important as Brexit.
It is. It should be a priority. It should take resource.
Right.
If you don't want to increase taxes, then you've got to shift resource from somewhere else.
To allow Greg time to ring his accountant and readjust his code, we'll take a quick break. But coming up, I'll be speaking German and arguing that Europe's got it wrong when it comes to immigration. To Germany, where die Hühner sind nach Hause gekommen, um zu schlafen. Don't worry, Michelle will translate that for you all later. When Angela Merkel recklessly threw open her country's borders and declared come one, come all to homeless migrants, she was hailed as a humanitarian hero. Now, weakened by elections and widely derided by many of her electorate, she's seen as a Dummkopf. In a total volte-face, how many languages in this? She has now set aside tens of millions of euros to bribe migrants with cash handouts to go back home. They get the loot to pay for new kitchens or bathrooms in their homelands. Risible, isn't it? Yeah. Fancy a new kitchen in Kabul? Here's a few thousand euros towards the cooker and maybe the fridge. This shows the lunacy of how Europe dealt with the migrant crisis. From being a land of total order, much of Germany is now riddled with unrest, and Chancellor Merkel is wholly responsible. Now, her nickname at home is Mutti. That's German for mother. Well, this was the mother and father of all errors. Oh, and by the way, the earlier sentence, it meant the chickens are coming home to roost.
Well, well done for your German.
Thank you. Oh, yes, I did it at quite high level.
Yeah, didn't agree with anything you said. But,
you like the accent.
Yeah, I like the
Yes.
accent.
I like what he said in German.
Yeah.
No one else understood
Nothing
it
else.
either.
I like the fact that you've come in a European theme dressed as Inspector Clouseau in that Mac. I mean, I think it's really lovely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I knew your topic. I totally disagree with you, and I think actually, I think that this is a bit of a PR exercise on Merkel's part. I think it's to deal with the rise of the far right in Germany. I think actually when Merkel took the decision that she made, it showed real leadership in that it was, let me finish, in that it was morally the right thing to do, but also long-term the right thing for Germany, because that first wave of immigrants were those that were from the educated classes. There were lots of doctors, scientists. There were. The people that could afford...
Not wholly Jew.
No, let me finish. The people that could afford to actually get on the boats and leave, that first wave, were a lot of those that were from the educated classes. And actually, I think what we'll see long-term is that there will be a skill shortage that will be filled by these communities. So I think... on the surface, it seems like, oh, she was just doing the nice thing and being altruistic. But actually, long-term for the German economy, I think they'll benefit.
But just before I throw it over, bribing these folk, do you not think it's unfair for these people as well? Some of whom have traversed half the world to come to a country where clearly they're not that welcome that much. So there's a few quid to go for Europe.
Let's see how many people actually take up the offer. I really think that this is a PR exercise.
Greg, do you think that the political problem in which she finds herself is she's still trying to put some form of government? And June rightly mentions the rise of the far right. She is the architect, to use the expression I used earlier, she's the architect of her misfortune with this policy, isn't she?
Yes, it doesn't mean the policy was wrong, but she is the architect of it, certainly.
So was the policy right?
Well, I think my son's lived in the Middle East for so many years, and I often talk to him. A lot of the people who have gone to Germany, it's just like a lot of people who've gone, will want to go back. If there is sanity again in Libya, and if there's sanity again in Syria, then a lot of these people will want to go back. And if it means helping them to go back, that seems to me to be...
And a lot of them are highly educated, which is part of the reason why they would.
The other thing is that what she knew about Germany, of course, is that it's not replacing its population, and that therefore they needed young... I mean, all Western societies need more young people. If they're going to pay your pension, Nick... Yeah. You need more young people. Now, actually, one of the few that doesn't is this country. We've got a younger population, but if you go to Germany, you go to Italy, you know, these are places where they needed young people. Now, the way
Not in these numbers,
well, I think the whole problem of what happened over those 2 summers was that none of us knew how to cope with movement of numbers on that scale.
And can I just add to that? I think that Merkel was prepared to fall on her sword to do what was right for Germany. And I think long term, we will see that she was right.
Well, why is she working like a Trojan now, trying to prop up her
Because you've got a rise of the far right.
No,
you know why she's doing that.
She's fuelled the rise
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. She was prepared to fall on her sword to do what was right for that country. And we'll see.
I want to bring Michelle, because I know you've got a head for figures, and you wonder why Germans are getting angry, right? Imagine you're a German taxpayer. Berlin set aside 685 million euros for accommodation for unaccompanied minors, integration programmes, yada, 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 language lessons. They spent 1.3 billion euros, virtually double. Taxpayers are going to get angry when they see money going that way, aren't they, Michelle?
Of course, but I think that, and I've said this previously, I think what Angela Merkel did was completely wrong. I understand that she might have had good intentions. I understand that she might have been trying to make up for ills of days gone by or whatever her motives were. But I think the way that she handled that situation was... there's no... I don't know, I've got very strong words for it, but they're not appropriate for a TV show.
Well, it's criminally irresponsible if you're leading the German people and you see the reaction it's had, and they are now divided towns and cities.
It's completely wrong. And when you, you know, she didn't have consideration for any other country for which the migrant population would be able to freely go into. She didn't have any consideration for the fact that actually these are very war-torn, conflict-ridden places that people were actually... Who were these people? There were no proper secure checks and balances of people coming in or not coming in. The whole thing was, in my view, terrible.
Let's get Rachel. We'll come back.
I think it's really hard to see what was the right thing to do when Syria conflict displaced, what was it, 5 million people?
Well, they never did get the right.
Germany is a first world country that could have has now given a home to 700,000
But it's trying
people.
to tempt them back. This is
now,
insane.
now you're now attacking her for offering them money to return to their country, which is completely devastated. Obviously, I think what we need to have is a European-wide Marshall Plan, which doesn't mean that one country is responsible for doing all these things. The EU has allocated, numbers of asylum seekers and desperate migrants to be taken in, and none of the countries are stepping up to the plate. We're not even in the asylum agreement in the EU, so it's terribly unfair to dump this on Germany and particularly to dump it on
bring it on themselves.
But a lot of people had left places like Syria and gone to places like... So a lot of people had left places like Syria and gone to places like Turkey, so they were out of that...
Well, the majority of them were in Jordan.
War-torn... Yeah, but they were out of that immediate war-torn danger. They weren't, immediately had risk to their life, and I think what we did...
Yes, and we were paying Turkey, remember, to keep them there in order for them not to travel into Europe.
We encouraged that mass... It was the biggest population shift since World War II or something, if I remember. But we encouraged that. Yes. We encouraged people to endanger their own lives.
Well, she did by saying open door policy.
And that's my point, that was wrong.
But what we did wasn't very nice. Do you remember Theresa May's Home Office bans that just said, go home? I mean, I prefer to have a kitchen in Syria. At least that she's being kind.
She didn't just say go home. She said, if you're here illegally...
Go home. White vans used to patrol neighbourhoods.
Yeah, but then you shouldn't be in a country illegally.
That's upholding the law. Anyway, great.
But wouldn't you... I mean, wasn't it a humanitarian gesture where she actually said, and she might have been politically wrong, and probably, well, she was politically wrong,
we can agree that.
But it was a humanitarian gesture that said there is a real humanitarian problem, and we, as the richest country...
paid for by the German people.
We, as the richest country in Europe, we can help solve it.
I did say I'm sure her intentions were good.
Yes.
I'm sure she had good intentions, but she shouldn't have done what she did. That will always be my view.
But shouldn't sometimes politicians do what they think is right as opposed to necessarily what they think is popular?
But you've also got to listen to
and then you bring the far right, and that was the right thing to do. Greg June, seriously?
No, my point is she showed... No, wait. My point is she showed real leadership on this issue, far more than any other European leader. And also, actually, whenever you have a wave of mass immigration, there is always uproar from the... native population.
But rarely you bribe them to go home with a kitchen.
When you had the Windrush population...
Yes, again, we didn't bribe these folk to go home.
People were up in arms. Most British people didn't want those immigrants here, but long term, it's actually been good for the British economy.
But we didn't try and bribe them with kitchens to go home.
That's not the point. So my point is, long term, this is going to be good for Germany, and we will see. We'll wish we did something similar.
We shall
Recht
see.
vielen Danke, Michelle.
We shall see, and it's the break. I'm going to brush up on my German, because at the moment, all I can do is give directions and order white wine and red wine on a Tassete mit Milch und Sein Zucker.
Yes.
It's me next, and I'll be talking about Bitcoin. You didn't know I could do that, did you?
Really good. A cup of tea with 2 sugars.
Yeah. Unless you've been hiding under a rock for these past few months, you've probably heard of Bitcoin, billed by some as the future and by others as a massive bubble waiting to burst. Whatever your opinion is, it is hard to ignore the cryptocurrency that, if you'd have invested a few quid in some years back, would now have made you a multi-millionaire. I'm of the opinion that crypto is the future. We will almost certainly see a correction of its purely upward trend and likely some regulation to boot. But in my view, crypto, and in particularly Bitcoin, is to money today what the internet was to communication in the late 90s. I see it as the future. And for some reason, I've decided to debate it with this lot.
Well,
it's been lovely. Thanks ever so much. I'm going to get in the car early.
Have you all got your wet towels? Have you all got your wet
What
towels?
have I let myself in for?
Well, as I understand it, there are lots of cryptocurrencies, but the bit that's going to change the world, as the internet did, is not cryptocurrencies, but blockchain, the actual system, which distributes the information and all the whatnots around the world in different computer programs.
Yeah.
Which makes them, unhackable, untraceable, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But the experts totally disagree with you about it. I mean, because they just say, it's a currency invented as a gambling form to make money. Therefore, it's not a proper currency.
If I invest in Boots the chemist, or Lloyd's the chemist, or Asda, or Sainsbury's, I know what I'm getting. There's something that backs it up. If I invest in one of Grace, there's something that backs it up. What actually backs this up? What is it? What are the foundations it's built on?
Yeah, so a few things then. And by the way, I'm not sitting here as some guru of Bitcoin, just to set your expectations,
you are,
guys.
So hey, I'll believe anything you say.
In the land of.
Yes,
where we are.
to your point, so yeah, you've got the blockchain, which is basically a decentralised. I'm trying to think the most simplest way to say this. It's like basically a decentralised set of ledgers.
Yeah, computer to computer.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of people are validating information. It's very hard to hack. It's very hard to have a single point of failure. And Bitcoin is one form of application of blockchain. And quite rightly, as you described, there are many other cryptocurrencies, or crypto coins or tokens, whatever people want to call them. Ethereum, Litecoin, blockchain, whatever. The list goes on. There's new ones launching every day. Now, to your point, so people often...
Which comes from Sir John Cunliffe, the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, as recently as last month. This is not a currency, this is not an accepted currency, there's no central bank that stands behind it. I mean, he's the Deputy Governor of the Bank of England.
But when he says it's not an accepted currency, in many places, actually, it is. So people will say, like, what is this Bitcoin malarkey? And you can call it a few different things. You could call it... Some people call it a commodity. I'll tell you, some people call it a commodity. Some people call it a store of value. Some people call it a medium of exchange. Some people call it a currency.
Right.
And it's the value. So
Michelle,
we put values on something.
Can I ask you how it's the future, then? So you think all of us are going to be using Bitcoin?
Well,
so grannies will be using
Bitcoin. Some of us might die before we get to the point where it's mass, implemented in terms of our age.
I don't think you should have looked at me then.
I didn't.
We all knew the point she was getting at. Make it that obvious.
I don't know.
If you noticed, I kept my
mother lived to 100. I'm going to be here for a long time.
My point is, this technology is still very much in its infancy. Like, if we can remember computing when it was kind of black screens and green numbers and all the rest of it, we're kind of in some ways at that early stage this early part of this
Okay,
revolution.
I've got a question. So if I decide I want to get in on the Bitcoin game,
Madness.
how do I do it? What do I do?
So first things first, it's very important. I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not saying to anybody, put your life savings into Bitcoin.
Okay.
Anybody watching this that's thinking, oh, I might have a dabble, you must understand that you can lose. You can lose. All of it.
All of it.
You can gain an awful amount of money.
But do you use real currency to buy
so basically,
Bitcoin?
in a nutshell, what you would do is you would go, right, today I want to buy some Bitcoin. So you would essentially set up an online wallet. And you can do this in many different ways, but I'm simplifying it. You'd set up an online wallet, you'd put money into this wallet and convert it into, you'd buy the Bitcoins.
You can do use real currency to begin with?
Yeah, you can do reverse ATM.
Michelle,
so
can I do some
caveats?
Can I do some quick caveats?
Of course, please.
The other currencies, cryptocurrencies, are available. It's completely unregulated.
That's what I said at the beginning.
Government-backed, and also one of our top policemen is also warning about people investing in it, and let's just hear what he has to say. Cryptocurrencies are not illegal, but they are unregulated, decentralised currencies that can be quickly transferred across borders. Organised criminal groups have been early adopters to evade traditional money laundering checks and statutory regulations. Thus spake Detective Superintendent Nick Stevens of the Met.
And just to underscore what Michelle is saying, then there is a heck of a lot of cash.
He's looking for his Bitcoin under the table.
Yes, that was Greg's Bitcoin crashing to the ground. That's the size of his
number
Bitcoin.
of them, actually.
Yes, that's right.
His digital wallet.
The current value of all Bitcoins, $180 billion, and we thank smallbusinessprices.co.uk for that fight.
That's bigger than all our UK currency combined, isn't it? Which is 105 billion.
It's vast, as Michelle says.
When I found out earlier in this week you were going to discuss this, I thought, I'm starting from nil. Right? So I thought I'd better find out something about it. So I read a lot of things about it. And in all my research, I came across something by a Sky correspondent, Tom Cheshire, who explained what's actually happened to the value of Bitcoin.
In terms of tracking the value of Bitcoin, ordering takeaway pizza isn't a bad reference.
In 2010, someone paid 10,000 Bitcoins to get 2 pizzas just like this one. Pretty tasty. But what's more tasty, at 5,000 Bitcoins per pizza, that amount of Bitcoin could now buy you this entire house.
Yeah, I mean, something that goes up in value that fast, you can't help feeling is suspect. So I looked up what some of the big bankers have said. Now, you'll say, well, that's what they would say. But the guy from Goldman Sachs says something that moves 20% overnight does not feel like a currency. It is a vehicle to perpetuate fraud. And you look back in history and you remember, well, the tulip boom.
The South Sea bubble.
The South Sea bubble.
Well, our property market's probably a bubble too.
Languages are my strong point. The tulip boom, you've got me, Greg. What's
tulip fever. They used to trade tulip bulbs.
Tulip fever?
Tulips became... People started trading them and paying a fortune for tulip bulbs until...
Seriously?
Yes, until the whole thing burst because they discovered... There wasn't
no value.
But let me come back to this. First of all, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, right? So if you're...
Yes, they do. Think of Brexit.
OK, so... it's always Brexit.
Great
But a banker...
Even she can get Bitcoins around to Brexit.
But crypto would challenge the fact of why do you need this centralised banking system? Why? Because if we can do direct exchange, why would we need this middle person? So, of course, I respect...
And we decide the value.
Yeah, we decide the value.
Based on the amount of exchange, people to people.
Must be decided on supply and demand. It's just
Yes,
how many people want to buy.
Precisely.
And the price... You bought some today, didn't you?
I did buy some more today, yeah.
How many more?
But just to be clear as well, you don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. You can buy portions of, subunits of...
So you bought a subunit of a Bitcoin today?
Yeah, you can buy... Do you know when you was a kid and you used to go to a shop and, like, sherbet lemons were £1 a quarter or whatever?
And you could get 2 ounces.
If you didn't have £1, you could buy 25p's
whatever,
worth.
Right.
So it's the same with a Bitcoin.
Well, but we accept that, but tell me what you bought today, then.
Well, it depends.
Sherbet lemons, by the sound
of it.
Yeah,
sherbet lemons, a bag of sherbet lemons.
You might have done better, you know.
No. So what you do, a couple of things that you need to be aware of. This is a scarce resource. There's only ever going to be like 21 million Bitcoins released or mined, would be the technical term.
So they're saying right now.
No, that's the case. That's the code, that's how it is.
Well, how do they stop me mining them then?
You could mine them. If you wanted to become a Bitcoin miner and that's what you wanted to dedicate your time and energy to, you could, if you had the right
Well, I did ask you earlier, how do I mine a Bitcoin?
You'd have to
Michelle,
invest
can I
money in... Let me tell him, because I think he wants to be a Bitcoin miner in his spare time. You'd have to buy an awful lot of hardware, the right software, pay an awful lot of money in electricity. It's quite time-consuming. It's very complex. It's getting harder the more Bitcoins are released. But what I'm saying is we need to be open-minded about the applications of, you've just described, blockchain, but also crypto, because I think that what we are seeing now, and by the way, we are due a massive, in my view, market correction, because what you're saying is it's shot up like this. Very soon we can...
Why did you buy today if you believe that's going to happen?
Because I just believe. So first of all, I believe in the long-term value of Bitcoin. It's going to be trading on the futures exchanges soon, so people will be making money on this thing dropping, not just increasing. So it'll be interesting to see what that happens. And I'm very excited.
Well, what if the government regulates and say there's a huge crash?
But regulation would be a good thing because it means that it's been taken seriously.
Well, all the money launderers would sell.
Well,
but
Michelle,
it's not just. Let me
thank
just
you.
it's not just for money
because we're
launderers.
coming to the end of the show. But thank you for that topic.
I
am none the wiser on Bitcoin. But thank you. I'm glad you are.
Oh, good. Glad I did such a good job there. I tried.
Oh, good. Good to hear that. Anyway, the British Parliament can boast quite a lot. It's known as the home of democracy. The oldest part dates from 1097, and there have even been attempts to blow it up. But there's one area where we've been, well, truly beaten by the Australians. And no, it's not the Ashes. Parliamentarians down under can now boast of having a marriage proposal in the chamber after Tim Wilson popped the question to his partner Ryan Bolger, who was sitting in the public gallery during a debate about legalising same-sex marriage. Let's have a little look.
Ryan Patrick Bolger, will you marry me? We'll chuck that in the memoirs and Hansard.
Should let Hansard note to record that that was a yes, a resounding yes. Congratulations.
Thank you, Speaker.
Well done, mate.
Well, it may be that Christmas spirit has made us all go soft, but that definitely gets our romantic gesture of the week. What do you think, guys?
I think it's lovely. It's made me all goose pimply. I can't wait till someone says that to me one day.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Good to see something pleasant come out of Australia at the moment with the way the cricket is going. So at least there's something we can celebrate.
Hold on, my dad's just come out.
Yes! Stanley Johnson's homosexual. We celebrate. He's come out.
He's come out of the jungle.
Oh, I misread the headline. Damn, I was going to celebrate.
We want Stanley Johnson back in the UK.
Yeah, we do.
He can stay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it for this week, but you can join the debate by searching for The Pledge on Facebook and Twitter. We'll see you next time. Bye.